there, and welcome to Planet Guardian 101. In this series, we dive into the 5 core elements that make life on this planet possible: earth, fire, water, air, and spirit. Each of these elements shape everything around us, from our environment to our whole planet to our human selves. And so we look at how these elements appear and function in these two different but intrinsically connected beings, us humans and planet Earth itself. From there, we examine the imbalance of these elements and we look into what's really going on the systems that keep life flowing. And most importantly, we'll explore the solutions to these problems, which already exist. They just need to be understood and put to practice by people like you. So stick with me to the end and I'll give you some missions to transform all of this knowledge into action. Get some real Planet Guardian experience out in the world. There are 3 tiers of missions for you to choose from: the self missions, local hero missions, and the ultimate Planet Guardian tier. Each tier explores a different level of influence that your actions can have, so you can really understand that everything you do matters. Every small effort that you put into the future that you want to see, the person that you want to be, it really shapes the life for everyone and everything on this planet. Yes, we truly are that powerful. All we need to do is remember it. And this is what this course is all about. I want to give you knowledge, science, and a different perspective, the Planet Guardian perspective, so that your unique mission on this planet becomes clear to you, or clearer to you if you already know what you're doing. In this episode, we're talking about water, the source and essence of life. It's a shapeshifter, and transformation is its power. It's beautiful in winter's first snow and then terrifying in the tsunami that washes its path like it barely existed. It has the power to get people dancing during a drought or lock them inside during a monsoon. You can't really grab it, but it can grab you, forming unbreakable ice that traps you with no escape. Water's transformation powers aren't exclusive to itself. Scientists call it the universal solvent because nothing dissolves more different substances than water. Nothing escapes it: solids, liquids, and even some gases, as we'll see in a bit. Towing the line of tangible and intangible, form and formless, no element is more mysterious than water. Spirit we can always dismiss as woo-woo, that person's belief. But water is ubiquitous. It is all around us and 90% of what is inside of us. And yet, how little we seem to realize its true power. In Brazil, we have a saying, água mole em pedra dura, tanto bate até que fura. It loosely translates to, soft water in hard rock persists until it pierces through. This is water, a soft yet relentless element that cannot be stopped from doing its own thing, sometimes with flow, sometimes with force. A shape-shifting alien that powers and controls everything from the background and the foreground. It boggles the mind. And yes, I say alien because water is technically not from Earth. According to scientists, the conditions of the distance between the sun and the Earth weren't conducive for the appearance of water, so we really don't know exactly how it got here. The scientific body has a bunch of different theories: solar winds bringing water particles, ice and minerals from passing asteroids, or comets releasing water as they pass near the sun. Whatever your theory, one thing is for certain: water is a gift. And a gift that Earth has used amazingly well. In Gaia, we have 2 different kinds of water: salt water and fresh water. For salt water, we have our oceans, Earth's cardiovascular system. The ocean has a thermohaline circulation. Thermo from temperature and haline from saline, the salt concentration. This thermohaline circulation functions like a very slow and powerful conveyor belt. This conveyor belt is driven by the differences in water density controlled by temperature and salinity. Cold and salty water is highly dense, so it sinks down, powering the conveyor belt, which then moves warm water from the surface and it circulates it with more cold water from the deep. This loop takes around 1,000 human years to circulate around the globe. If you think about it, the ocean currents are effectively Earth's cardiovascular system, distributing heat like blood carries warmth, nutrients like blood carries oxygen, and maintaining the planet's climate balance, our thermoregulation. And then Earth has its fresh water. During winter, most precipitation happens as snow, building up to create frozen reservoirs. As temperature rises in spring and summer, this snow melts and travels down the mountains. This rain and snow melt then replenish shallow ponds and lakes, increases soil moisture, percolate into deep groundwater aquifers for storage. This is facilitated by the forest roots and underground ecosystem of the Earth element, as you may remember. The whole of life is taking that cold drink of water in the morning, just in a seasonal scale, not our daily human one. We think we have a lot of water underground, but that's only 30% of Earth's freshwater reserves. Glaciers, ice sheets, and snowpacks account for almost 70% of it, with most reserves being located in the places you'd expect: Antarctica, Greenland, the Arctic, and mountain glaciers like the Himalayas, the Andes, the Alps, and the Rockies. The water element is truly a sight to behold on this planet. I mean, come on. In humans, we have the same, but smaller. We are walking oceans. Just like Earth is mostly water in its surface, humans are also mostly water on our insides. And just as Earth circulates water through ocean and freshwater cycles, the human body also has two interconnected water systems. Our blood is made of plasma, which is mostly water, and then proteins, glucose, minerals, hormones, etc. Just like Earth's oceans, our blood is salty, nutrient rich. It circulates around the body carrying oxygen, heat, and energy. Earth circulation takes around 1,000 years to go around the globe. Our blood completes the cycle around our body in 60 seconds. So what a human moves in 1 minute, Earth moves in 1,000. So just think about the time scale of this. It is so wild to consider that we are indeed just another cell on Earth's body. We are smart and powerful cells, but just a small part of this big whole, this oneness of all things. Apart from the ocean water in our plasma, the human body also has freshwater reserves in our own mountain lakes, our cells. Water flows in and out of those based on osmotic pressure, like snowmelt coming down from the mountains. It may not seem so, but we are water beings living in a water planet, the pale blue dot. And who better to speak about the water element in humans than the humans that know the water element best, the indigenous people of this world. Indigenous people talk about water as a sacred spirit. It's considered to be a living and moving being that carries stories and connection. Beyond the spiritual aspect, indigenous ecological knowledge contains thousands of generations of wisdom about adapting and evolving with the environmental world around them. Before the European Union arrived on the shores of the American continent, indigenous people had already been living and thriving here for at least 15,000 years. To put that into perspective, the United States is 250 years old and Canada 150. Over 550 generations of indigenous stewardship compared to 2, 3, 4 of colonization. Of course, we treat this land as a resource to be consumed. We know nothing about it. We have no connection, spiritual or ancestral, to it. Indigenous people, however, do. The Coast Salish people talk about water as a living spirit that exists in everything, all living creatures, but also glaciers, rivers, oceans, the rain. The rain? Water carries our original instructions. Down in the Amazon, far away from the frigid winters of the north, indigenous people came to the same conclusion. Water is a spiritual being that carries with it the essence of life. From the outside, you may only see a river to bathe in, but in fact is so much more. I'd like to make a small parenthesis here to address that I was raised in a colonized country, in Catholic schools. So I grew up learning that indigenous people were savages and that white culture was superior, so taking their resources was helping them not waste what they had. This was my standard of thinking, and I think unconsciously is a standard of thinking of a lot of people. Now, I know better. I know that indigenous knowledge is inherent awareness and deep understanding of the language of nature. The invisible flows and patterns that can only be detected by generations of careful attention and humble nurturing. What indigenous people can do, reading weather patterns, predicting animal migrations, understanding how beavers affect salmon, which affect whales. Scientists are now calling this enhanced mindfulness and the ability to perceive from multiple perspectives simultaneously. In other words, the skills we need to deal with the climate crisis. Indigenous wisdom isn't an alternative perspective, it is the perspective. It is primary source knowledge from one of the longest continuous scientific observation periods in history. Their knowledge predates written language, which is why they use storytelling to pass on their knowledge, predates agriculture in most of the world, and even the Egyptian pyramids by thousands of years. Thousands of years of decoding language and behavior of the natural world to be able to understand and ride its flow like you're part of it, because you are. When you understand that Earth's water systems and your body's water systems are functioning with the same principles on different scales, you realize that, one, you are a water system, not a body containing water, but a walking, thinking ocean contained within a body. Two, Earth is a body, not a planet with water, but a living hydrological organism. And three, the water that has cycled through the earth has been here for millions of years. So the same water that makes you is the water that made the dinosaurs. And I think that's pretty cool. But what this really means is that we are all interconnected. When we harm Earth's waters, we harm our own internal waters. And we harm water in, unfortunately, many ways. One of our main issues is pollution. Our mining industry produces toxins, our agriculture relies on chemicals, and our water is riddled with plastic and waste. In Canada alone, the mineral industry generates 1 million tons of waste rock and other hundreds of thousands of tons of tailings per day. Some of the toxins being thrown in our waters are extremely bad for living things. Mercury, lead, arsenic, cadmium, chromium, neurotoxic, carcinogenic, you name it. All of these accumulate in our plants, our fish, and our own bodies, causing long-term irreversible damage that can ripple through generations. These toxins have a creeping quality to them where bad effects culminate after slow accumulation over time. A sad example from the 1950s, a chemical factory in Minamata, Japan was releasing mercury compounds in its wastewater, which, of course, they dumped into the ocean. The shellfish of the area started filtering this methyl mercury and fish started breathing it in. The people then ate this seafood, accumulating in their own bodies all of the mercury consumed by these animals. This is called bioaccumulation, by the way. For 36 years, the population of Minamata increasingly suffered muscle weakness, blindness, hearing, and speech difficulties. And mercury's neurotoxicity also installed itself in generations, causing deformations in babies, microcephaly, extensive cerebral damage during development. What we do to the water outside of us eventually affects the water inside of us. Agriculture is the primary user of groundwater, but it's also the top cause of water pollution. Every year, about 500,000 tons of pesticides, 12 million tons of nitrogen, and 4 million tons of phosphorus fertilizer are applied to crops. A lot of this fertilizer runs off into rivers, and then we get situations like the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, which 6,000 square miles where nothing can live. This type of poisoning is happening all over. Project Drawdown reports that multiple areas in the world overuse or underuse fertilizer. So there's plenty of room for solution here. Some issues are less easy to solve. Plastic pollution is a massive issue for water, not just because it clogs rivers and watersheds, but plastic is made of oil and water is a universal solvent. Although plastic takes millions of years to decompose if it does at all, water is so powerful that it managed to break away microplastics away from the plastic, and those eventually make their way into the soil, into animals, into us. This is why pollution is so catastrophic, because once something touches water, water will dissolve it, carry it, and spread it everywhere. The universal solvent becomes the universal distributor of our mistakes and neglect. Microplastics have been found everywhere, on the top of the snowy peaks of the Alps, down to the tiny bodies of ocean microorganisms. The same way plastic clogs our rivers and pollutes Earth's waters, microplastic clog our veins and poisons our insides. What we do to the water outside of us eventually comes back to the water inside of us. Currently, it's calculated that there's around 170 trillion plastic particles now circulating in the ocean's surface waters alone, being slowly broken down to clog the bodies and organs of the living beings it passes through. Overconsumption, you've heard it before, but overconsumption is what creates the trash that becomes the pollution that leaches into the waters of the earth and into our bodies. This point appears constantly throughout this course because so much of the issues today are related to a privileged part of humanity consuming much more and much more inefficiently than the rest of the world. And then you have the very, very privileged, the unfathomably rich, the 1% responsible for the exorbitant majority of the resource hoarding. But we don't just overconsume in the materials and the stuff that we buy and throw away. We also directly overconsume water itself. Over the last 50 years, freshwater withdrawals have tripled. From research, the US uses more water per capita than any other developed nation. Reports show that some Americans use 60% of their household water on lawns, on keeping non-native grass alive. To put into perspective, people in Congo survive on less water per day than a single 5-minute American shower. Another source of water overconsumption. I mentioned before, agriculture consumes 70% of all freshwater withdrawals on top of polluting water through chemicals. Each human being should drink around 2 liters of water a day. It takes about 3,000 liters of water to produce the daily food needs of one person. That's 1,500 times more water than you drink just to produce your food. And one of the main reasons for this wild contrast is something you also heard before. Our food system hinges on factory farming practices, and the dairy and the meat industry especially are incredibly water consuming. And on top of that, 50% of the grains produced in the US go toward animal feed, redirecting that from people. So we're using water to grow crops, to feed animals, to produce meat and dairy. It's an incredibly ineffective system that compounds water waste at every level. It uses way more water than it needs to, and it pollutes way more than it should. And here's the cruel irony, because these antiquated irrigation practices and then mismanagement, 40% of that water is wasted. That means 40% of the water is just gone. We're draining our rivers and aquifers to waste it. This is not the way, but again, a lot of room for solutions. All of this overconsumption, the production, the transport, the waste, they generate emissions that get absorbed by the ocean, contributing to ocean acidification. What we have to understand is that the ocean is the planet's buffer. Its sheer water volume gives it an insane capacity for absorption, and it has been absorbing all of the carbon dioxide that humanity has been releasing from fossil fuels. Whatever our dwindling forests do not capture and sink back into the earth, the oceans take it in. This obviously causes multiple problems. Remember how water is universal solvent? Well, it doesn't just dissolve microplastic, it dissolves even what plastic becomes, carbon dioxide. As the ocean absorbs humanity's emissions, carbon dioxide and water react to form carbonic acid. This acidifies the ocean. Sure, the ocean is huge, but this has been happening for over 200 years now, at an explosive pace. Every year that humanity overconsumes beyond what Earth can replenish, the ocean has been absorbing it all. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the ocean has seen a 30% increase in acidity. This rate of change is 50 times faster than any time on Earth that humanity has known. Our inability to transition away from fossil fuel systems only accelerates this. The chain effects are also staggering. Acidification reduces water capacity to hold onto oxygen, meaning sea creatures can no longer breathe. It's interesting to me that carbon dioxide is capable of creating unbreathable air on land and unbreathable water in the oceans. It really reminds me that the original state of the planet is uninhabitable, an unbreathable, hot and dry carbon dioxide atmosphere. It was only after water allowed the appearance of plants who created the breathable atmosphere that humans could even think of even becoming a thing. Humbling. So in addition to the ocean, remember how snow, ice, and glaciers are 70% of the freshwater reserves of the world? Beyond our human use of it, they are the planetary buffers for heat. Think of it as planet Earth's defense system against fevers. When pockets of heat occur, the ice absorbs that heat, melting into the ocean. Without these buffers, the fever temperature would skyrocket. Venezuela, once home to 6 glaciers, has now lost them all, with the last one having disappeared just in 2024. For the people of Merida, these glaciers were called the 5 White Eagles, and they were a source of pride and identity. The city was known as the City of Eternal Snows. Not anymore. Next in line to lose their glaciers are Indonesia, Mexico, and Slovenia. The planet is losing its protection against explosive fevers, and humans and all life on the planet are losing their drinkable water reserves. You can see the immense interconnected importance of water. Last issue, I know it's a lot, but now we have a new thing. On top of all the industries and systems with unsustainable use of water, we now have a new threat, AI. This is a bit of a new topic, but I think there's enough there for me to have to speak about it. The data centers being built to support our growing use of this technological tool, which granted has amazing potential, they pollute air and use up a lot of water, which is then polluted. On top of this, of course, these centers are put in vulnerable places no one cares about. 42% of Microsoft's water consumption and 15% of Google's come from places already experiencing water stress. So they're drinking from the thirsty first, but they're also drinking from you. Google's data centers worldwide consume nearly 6 billion gallons of water in a year. To summarize your emails, help you write birthday invitations, suggest smart replies. The average data center uses around 300,000 gallons of water a day to keep cool, roughly the equivalent to water use in 100,000 homes. And that's water that is being redirected from your refrigeration, your air conditioning, your showers, your use, or that could be left in nature to continue producing breathable air, food, and drinkable water for the planet. I know, it's a lot and it's daunting, but we cannot change what we refuse to confront, right? And thankfully, amazing people in the world have been studying and protecting water for generations, figuring out the solutions and then implementing them. Here they are. Watersheds are water's natural path. Gravity and nature shape the snowpacks that melt from the mountains all the way to the oceans, following gravity, carving channels, creating floodplains, storing in wetlands. When this path is respected, water purifies itself, stores itself, and distributes itself based on the accumulated knowledge of billions of years of evolution on this planet. Indigenous people have read these patterns for generations, and so we must trust in their knowledge and wisdom to lead us in matters of the environment. That is trusting and following the advice of experts. The difference between indigenous and Western water management comes down to the fundamental belief. Indigenous people traditionally recognize that water is a living being, a friend, an ancestor, a sacred entity that should be managed with respect. Our Western colonized perspective, on the other hand, treats water as a resource to be consumed, controlled, and rerouted. We've missed the fact that water is the entity to which we owe all our lives. One powerful example from the indigenous practices here on the West Coast is called the beaver principle. Traditionally, indigenous people manage water resources by prioritizing and protecting the beaver, because beavers are literally ecosystem engineers. They build dams, they create wetlands, they restore floodplains, and they provide habitat for all the wildlife around them. Beaver landscapes even protect people and wildlife from wildfires and droughts. Nature's web of life is the inherent intelligence of evolution expressing itself through all of the individuals it contains. Indigenous people are not only aware of this, but they know it intimately. They can read when something is wrong with its stability. They've been observing these patterns for millennia, while Western science is only now catching up to what they've always known. Water knows where to go. Our job isn't to control it, but to respect its path and protect its purity. This means restoring Indigenous people's collective rights to the lands and the water that they have always taken care of, as well as ensuring that they participate in the formulation, implementation, and evaluation of developments that happen in the area. And honestly, the practical benefits are just undeniable. More than 3,000 cities around the world could improve water security by 10% or more simply by improving forest management and agricultural practices. That's thousands of cities that could just solve their water crisis by respecting water's natural path, and then listening to those who've been protecting it all along. Next solution is stopping toxins and pollutants from getting in the water in the first place. We can do this in a couple of different ways. Structurally and societally, we need to regulate toxic industries. We can't just allow corporations to use our watersheds and oceans as their personal chemical landfill. And here's the sad reality. Without enforced standards, corporations have very little incentive to spend time, money, or resources dealing with their own garbage and waste. It's unfortunate that we can't trust them to regulate themselves, but the fact that we've allowed them to do exactly that is the reason why we're in this mess. What we need: mandatory, reliable, and consistent safeguards for industrial activities, high environmental performance standards without profit loopholes, and then procedures for recovery of legacy pollution. So polluters pay to clean for their mess, not us with our taxes. History has shown that cleanup is always more expensive than prevention. We can pay now or pay much more later. The choice is obvious. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Everyone knows that, we just seem to have forgotten it for some reason. Regulation handles industry, but individually we stop pollution by reducing our consumption and emissions. Decreased consumption means less waste ending up in the waters. And here's something that might be a little bit counterintuitive. One of the most direct, reliable, lasting, and effective ways to protect water is to care about how much carbon dioxide you put into the atmosphere. Remember ocean acidification? The ocean absorbs 30% of our CO2 emissions, turning it into carbonic acid. So when you reduce emissions from transit, online shopping, energy use, you're not just helping the air, you're protecting the water. Every ton of CO2 that you don't emit is a ton that the ocean doesn't have to absorb and process into acid. Turn off the tap of the pollution at its source, and you protect multiple elements at once. Something our taxes could be doing instead of subsidizing fossil fuels is to fund regeneration. This means cleaning up our waters, whether from trash or chemicals, and then protecting and safeguarding these areas so that the natural ecosystem can replenish and bring back balance. And here's the beautiful part, because when we get out of the way, nature knows exactly what to do. It knows better than us, but we have to stop polluting it and trashing it in the first place. Take the Elwha River in Washington state. In one of the largest dam removal projects in history, both dams were demolished between 2011 and 2014. Within months, salmon returned to their ancestral spawning grounds, their numbers multiplying exponentially. The rejuvenated river ecosystem also saw a resurgence of other wildlife too: bears, bald eagles. The entire food web started rebuilding itself. The lesson? Sometimes the most effective restoration is simply letting nature do its thing in its infinite wisdom. These four solutions, they work together: respecting watersheds, regulating industry, reducing emissions, and cleaning up legacy damage. Each one reinforces the other. And the best part, you can contribute to all of them at different scales starting right now. Let me give you some direction. Here are your missions. For your self-missions, get to know the watershed that feeds the area where you live. How does the water distribution system work in your city? What does your city's water management look like? Look up whose traditional territory you're living on. There are online resources for Canada, for example, and nativeland.ca can help you find that information. But what do the Indigenous people of your area say about water? Actually, go visit your watershed. Spend some time in the presence of the water that feeds your area and shapes your life in the background. Many Indigenous communities have public teachings or cultural centers where they share their wisdom. So seek them out respectfully. You guys know I'm a huge proponent of journaling, so journal about your experience with water, especially your childhood experiences like great times at the beach or lake or snow or rain. And this last one might sound kind of weird, but meditate in the shower or a bath, but don't stay too long, or shower in the dark. Be completely present with the water and all of your other senses beside vision, even though you kind of start seeing things after a little bit. For your local hero missions, speak to your government representatives, because the lobbyists hired by industries are definitely doing that. While you're trying to conserve water at home, fossil fuel lobbyists are meeting with your government representatives and pushing through pipelines that risk polluting entire watersheds. In British Columbia, where I live, banks pour millions of dollars into pipelines, despite the fact that it cuts through Indigenous land, drills under salmon spawning rivers, and receives dozens of environmental violations. And then, when Indigenous people and environmentalists put pressure on the company to abandon the project of the pipeline, the federal government just went and bought it and then pushed it through anyway. That's the power of the fossil fuel lobbying. They literally convinced the government to become the oil company, and it's something that we see reverberated like even now. Just yesterday, actually. That's why you need to speak to your government representatives, because the fossil fuel industry is definitely doing that. Against pollution and water insecurity, you can pressure your city and municipality on 3 critical fronts. One is water infrastructure upgrades. Aging water pipes lose 20 to 30% of treated water to leaks before it even gets into your house. Ask your city to fix this source of waste. To agricultural runoff regulations. So remember how agricultural practices uses 70% of our groundwater while being the #1 cause of water pollution? Push for stronger regulations on fertilizer and pesticide use in your region. This is also great for your health if you're eating local fresh produce, which I hope you're doing. And 3, green infrastructure implementation. Advocate for rain gardens or biowalls or permeable pavement. These let water follow its natural path instead of overwhelming storm drains and causing floods. And these solutions help with rewilding too, since water and ecosystems are intimately connected. When water flows naturally, biodiversity flourishes. And last, for your local hero missions, demand corporate water accountability. Ask the hard questions. Which companies use the most water in your region? Are data centers draining your aquifer to cool their servers? Are they paying fair prices for public water, or are they getting sweetheart deals while the residents pay more? Find out, make some noise about it. And now the top tier Planet Guardian missions. This is one of these instances when you do something small and then it reverberates in the grand scheme of things. But the best thing that you can do for the water of this planet is lower how much carbon dioxide you use every day. When you reduce your CO2 emissions, you're not just addressing ocean acidification, you're also slowing the climate change that gives us water instability, droughts, and floods. You're reducing the plastic pollution that leaches microplastics into our water, and you're literally reducing the demand to mine for oil and gas, which poisons water, air, and earth. Lowering your emissions turns off multiple taps of pollution in one action, and influencing the health and balance of all of the other elements too. Earth, air, fire definitely, and even spirit. To reduce your energy use at home, the classic stuff. Recycle and avoid buying plastic. Turn off unused lights, since a lot of the energy sources rely on fossil fuels, including electricity, which just makes no sense to me. Seems so archaic. Increase walking, biking, using public transportation over taking your own car. And then when you got that down, support advancement to clean energy, like solar, wind, even geothermal is super interesting, so that we can transition away from fossil fuel dependent energy systems, which is where we currently are entrenched. Get your hands wet. Join organizations or initiatives that clean waterways or wild biodiversity and ecosystems that help keep watersheds healthy. It's a great time, I promise. So satisfying. You feel like such a good human after a good river cleanup, you know? It's a definite upgrade to your Planet Guardian level and aura points for days. And last but definitely not least, support Indigenous water protectors. When Indigenous communities, they fight pipelines or dams, they're not just protecting their own territory like we sometimes like to think. They are protecting your watershed too. These are the frontline defenders of the water that you drink and the rivers that your children will inherit. And remember, when you advocate for systemic change, you're not just one person. You're part of a global movement filled with amazing people already fighting to protect this planet and our futures. Every email to a representative, every protest that you attend, every conversation with a friend about the topics that we talked about here. These add to the wave, which then ripple into greatness, just like our powerful water. And that's it for the amazing element of water, everybody. Please take some time to connect to it. Draw from the spiritual and material power of this element that is the essence of all life on Earth. I recommend the shower in the dark. This is also the last element of our Planet Guardian series, so congratulations, you've leveled up and graduated. Now you know the basics of the elements that form the oneness that binds us all, planet Earth and all living beings on here. I made this course because I believe that each and every one of us, we come to this planet with a mission. That mission is to discover who we really are and then embody that every day, figuring out through our authentic passions and drives what we're meant to do on this earth. And the beauty of it is that everyone has their unique mission that only they could discover and complete. You are here after being shaped by 4 billion years of evolution on this planet. With the information that you learned in this course, I hope you can see how powerful you are in relation to your immediate surroundings, to your local surroundings, to planet Earth as a whole. I know it may seem we're too small to matter, but I hope you realize that every single word and action and interaction reverberates in the grand scheme in ways you could never predict. There are unseen forces operating in the background that rely on you following your authenticity, your biological intuition, your critical thinking, your conscious human intelligence, your capacity for empathy, collaboration, and ultimately love. Yeah, it's corny, but all of these things power the evolutionary web of life that makes our existence possible. It wants to thrive, it wants to flourish and be paradise. But it can only do that if we embody our roles as planet guardians in whatever capacity that means to us, to create a world and systems in which it can do that. Thank you so much for sticking to the end and being interested in protecting this magical planet full of amazing creatures and mysteries. It has been a pleasure to be on this journey with you. But the journey is not over. Now that we know the basics, we embody them and start walking on the way. So please stick around because there will be more Planet Guardian content, workshops, ponderings, and thinking about some interesting things. I would love to have you on board. Congratulations again on completing this course. I'll see you around, Guardian.